So all I have to say about that is take that evidence, Doug, put that in your pipe, and smoke it. What's up, thinkers? Hey, welcome to Believing Thinkers, where we're loving God with all our minds. Today, we are going to be talking about and responding to a video done by Doug, aka PineCreek, which I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with. Doug did a video response to the entire Apologetics Empire video, and he also took the very end of that and then made a separate video. We're just going to respond to that separate video and the points that Doug made there, because I think they're very valuable, not only for us, but actually for Doug and other atheists to understand.
Or the Kalam.
Okay, so we had, I think, the moral argument won out as these 12 guys. I think there was at least 7 or 8 people who said the moral argument. A few contingencies, a couple kalams. Now, notice what they didn't say. The bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ is pretty good evidence for God, is it not? None of them said that. You notice what none of them said? The inner testimony of the Holy Spirit guiding them to the truth of God's existence. You notice none of them said that? Like, I understand that these might be arguments for Christianity, but don't you get a twofer here?
Now, to some extent, I would say, yeah, that's a fair point. Perhaps we should have included that. But the question was, what are your favorite arguments for God's existence? Usually we use the resurrection to prove Jesus and Christianity specifically. At least that's the way most would do that. If you're starting with God's existence, that's generally not the thing you're going to start with. The other thing that Doug needs to understand is that, I assume he does, is that there's different types of apologetics, or different methodologies. So you've got classical, you've got cumulative case, you've got evidential, which is Gary Habermas, who will start there and finish there. So if you're not using that methodology, you're not going to start there. So yeah, the criticism seems kind of moot because it's irrelevant. It's known as missing the point. The question had nothing to do with Christianity. It had to do with God's existence. That's why the Christians responded and the apologists responded the way they did.
It's really curious to me that this belief that a God exists boils down to philosophical arguments. It boils down to this.
So our responses boil down to philosophical arguments. Now, this is an interesting statement. So I want to avoid straw-manning him and putting claims in his mouth that he's not asserting. I'd almost like to know if Doug then is assuming here science, that we can only verify things through science. He didn't go that far. He did not say that. So don't put those words in my mouth because I'm not putting them in his. I'm asking the question, is that what he's assuming we need to do? But science uses a lot of philosophy. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment. That's philosophy. Einstein's elevator is a thought experiment. That's philosophy. There are thought experiments done all the time in science which are philosophy. We use induction in philosophy. It's in philosophy because it's philosophical argument, inductive arguments. We use that as well in science. We use abduction in science. It's part of philosophy. So, Doug didn't really make this claim, so I do want to be careful not to falsely represent his view there. Doug's not saying it, but somebody may walk away thinking that's what he's saying, and my response is no. Look, philosophy is used all the time. Most of what Doug's doing would be considered bad philosophy, but it's philosophy nonetheless. He's giving his thoughts about existence and reality and how our views about those things are wrong. So, all right, moving on.
Moral argument. I'm not going to get out of my chair, mind you. I'm not going to do any experiments, mind you. I'm not going to show you anything, mind you. We're just going to sit back. Oh, excuse me, my cigar went out.
All right, so this next one I find funny. I'm not going to get out of my chair. I'm not going to do any experiments, mind you. Just going to philosophize, if you will. But this is where I think Doug has gone wrong. He fails to understand the basic arguments for God. Particularly, I'm just going to start with the Kalam. That was one of the 2 arguments I gave, and I know Mike Jones, Inspiring Philosophy's response would fall into this category as well, and that is this, that those 2 arguments, particularly the Kalam, deals with a lot of scientific data that has been observed. In other words, we're already presuming that. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's look at what Graham Oppy has to say about it. So Graham Oppy, here we go. This book is the Kalam Cosmological Argument, Volume 1. There are 2 books on this by Bloomsbury Studies in Philosophy of Religion. This is Graham mentioning that in support of the second premise, Craig offers 4 supporting arguments, 2 a priori, so we can sort of categorize that as being philosophical the way Doug is thinking of it here, and 2 a posteriori. That means it relies on something other than just your mind alone to prove it's true, like observation. And these 4 supporting arguments are as follows, and then he lists them. Okay. By the way, these are in Craig's original argument from 79. He doesn't just give the kalam, whatever begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe, had a cause. That's not the whole argument. In other words, there's layers and layers and layers of support for for each of those premises in order to get us to the conclusion. You've got to sort of understand all of the literature before you start nitpicking and criticizing it like this, or otherwise you're going to end up with egg on your face. And so I think that his argument, albeit I like the satire, fails because ultimately he misunderstands the argument, doesn't realize that the sub-premises that even somebody like Graham Oppy, who's not a Christian, he's a philosopher of religion, professional philosopher, he's got his PhD, deals with this stuff. He's an atheist. And even he acknowledges the support for the premises here. Now, he may not agree with Craig. He doesn't. That's what he's going to go out to do, is to criticize Craig in the book. So if you're an atheist, still get the book. You probably enjoy it. The point is that it relies also on scientific evidence. 3.1, scientific observation strongly confirms standard Big Bang cosmology. 3.2, according to standard Big Bang cosmology, the visible universe arose from an initial singularity less than 20 billion years ago. 3.3, therefore the universe began to exist. But it doesn't just rely on that then, those claims. Craig relies on scientific data, cosmic background, redshift, the radiation there, cosmic background radiation, the redshift, and uses that data. So that one, and certainly again Mike Jones's arguments are almost always his premises are almost always heavily supported by scientific data. So to say that we're just sitting in our chairs and doing this is sort of silly. Now, another good article, one last one, let me share with you guys. Sorry, I cut that too soon. It's this one. Here we go. Is the Kalam cosmological argument. This is Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's argument on the paper on the cosmological argument. It's free. You just do cosmological argument and SEP, or Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and you can see some of the supporting data. Here's the outline of it. So the Kalam cosmological argument. So the causal principle in quantum physics and impossibility of an actual infinite are going to be more philosophical. But Big Bang theory of cosmic origins is scientific data. All right. So whether you agree with it or not doesn't matter. That's not my point. You can disagree with it all you want. That's fine. You have every right to, as long as you're being logical or rational, I'll say, about it. What I'm looking for is to simply say, look, if you're going to criticize it and act like that's all we're doing is armchair philosophy, you really missed the mark. Do the research, dig into this stuff, and read it. And God forbid, Doug, don't respond back and say, oh, I have done the research and read it, because that means then that you're being intellectually dishonest here, that you know better and you're just saying whatever anyway. All right, so all I have to say about that is take that evidence, Doug, put that in your pipe, and smoke it. Take care, guys. God bless.